What's going on, fellas? Welcome back to the Dale Tales podcast. Man, this weekend, and I am so in love with the chaos we are getting with college football this weekend. I said from the beginning of the season because of the 12-team playoff, and I still think we need far more teams than this, but that's for another video. We'll talk about that another time. Right now, I need a lot of people to understand that from what I'm seeing, the rankings almost do not matter. You know, we're looking at Colorado in the Big 12 with the fact that they are not ranked, but ignoring the fact that they can still be one of the guaranteed teams in. The champion of the Big 12 is a guaranteed shoe in for the playoffs, and that's a big thing. If Colorado, if they just play smart, clean up their schedule, and win the Big 12, they're in, whether they're ranked or not. They're guaranteed a top four spot because they're in a Power Four conference. So they got a lot of work to do on their hands, and I definitely hope this is something that they can do. But the rankings are showing us week to week that, everything is changing. There's so much more parity in college football right now, and NIL, man, NIL made college football more fair and more fun for the viewers and for the fans and everything like that by complete accident. I don't think anyone had the intention of NIL actually fixing the entire problem of college football. And right now we definitely no longer need undefeated teams, and the top 25 is proving that. Some of these teams are losing to much smaller unranked schools, and they're not being knocked out of the top 10, at least not yet. So basically what we are understanding is that they value teams with one loss, or in some cases some might argue two losses. We'll see what happens later on down the road. you know if you go into this playoff undefeated, you have to know you have a chip on your shoulder, because if every other team except for one team, let's say Ohio State, for example, has no losses in this season, I think the advantage goes to the team with the loss, because they exactly know how it feels. They don't want to go back to that moment, and they don't want to relive that moment, and they have nothing to lose. And that makes a team very dangerous. So that's something we got to keep a close eye on. So it definitely gives, the team with the one loss an edge. Also, in the SEC race, definitely is wide open. We can no longer say Bama's the best, Georgia's the best, Tennessee's the best, because now you also have Texas in the picture, and them boys are not playing around, man. Them Longhorns are coming out, and they're playing tough, and they're playing smart. They have Georgia in 2 weeks, so we're going to learn a lot about Texas as well. The Big Ten race is wide open. It's nowhere near being done. We still have undefeated teams, and teams such as Indiana, which we'll talk about more here in a little bit. And we still have Penn State, who's undefeated. That won't last long because they have to play Ohio State down the road. They don't have to play Michigan this year, so they get to avoid that a little bit. And my question is, how many SEC teams and Big Ten teams will actually get into the playoffs this time? Because this is going to be interesting. So right now, for me, I'm almost at the point where I'm just ignoring the rankings. And like I said, we'll talk more about this here soon, and I'll definitely have an entire video just based on the rankings. So the game still must be played, and I think that's the most important thing right now. So let's talk about some of these games that happened this weekend, because there were definitely a lot of stunners. So let's get right into that. Here we go. So let's start with Syracuse and UNLV. A lot of people really had UNLV winning this game because they were the ranked team, but at the same time, Kyle McCord is playing very well with Syracuse, and I think we got a very good game in this one, and it was definitely a showstopper for sure. Syracuse really had to come out surviving from this game the entire way. They definitely had to depend on Kyle McCord throwing the ball in the right places, and he had to throw the ball 63 times in this game. He completed 40 passes for 355 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception, so he was definitely able to stay consistent. But that's a lot of passes also in a game, 63 times. They definitely had to claw back into the game, though, because they were down quite a good. They were down pretty good at a certain point. They really had to work for this one. Going into halftime, it was already 21-7, so they had a lot of ground to make up, and they really needed this game in the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter is really where Orange showed up, because they brought the game and tied it to 38-38, which then took the game to overtime, and then Syracuse Orange definitely ended up winning this game 44-41, and it was definitely a big thriller. All right, so now let's go on over to Michigan State and Oregon. Now, this one was definitely interesting as well because we don't really know what Michigan State is right now. And I think we can all agree with this. They're really in a weird place where they're not necessarily good, but they're not necessarily bad either. And that kind of puts them in this really strange tweener spot, you know? They can definitely put up a really good game in the beginning, but they're definitely not good enough to win against any good teams right now. When it comes to the second half, they haven't had much production in the second half when it comes to playing good teams. You know, we've seen them against Ohio State, we've seen them against Oregon, and in the first half, they generally play very well, and then in the second half, it's just domination by the better team from there. So that's something that they definitely got to work on and figure out to see what they have to do. And maybe it just might need more time recruiting because I actually think they have a really good coach. In the case of this Oregon game, they actually did not score until the fourth quarter. They ended up putting up 10 points, but they got beat pretty good on this one. Oregon definitely used this game to prepare for Ohio State next week. That will not be an easy game. And, of course, Oregon moved up in the rankings to number 3, and Ohio State is number 2. I think that was purposely done because they know this game is coming up. But the quarterback for the Ducks definitely cannot make the same mistakes that he made in this game because Ohio State will make him pay for it. You know, he did complete 20 passes on 32 attempts for 257 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he had 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions would definitely cost you some points with Ohio State, so that's not something you want to do. Ohio State will make you pay for that. That defense is pretty good right now. So, you know, Oregon has a couple things to clean up. They definitely do have a chance in this game. They're going to have their home crowd, you know, with Ohio State being a little bit jet lagged traveling to the West Coast. So there's definitely a lot of factors that play in this game, you know, but Jordan James for the Ducks, he carried the ball 24 times for 166 yards and 1 touchdown. That's insane numbers. I don't know if he's going to, even if he touches the ball 24 times against Ohio State, he's definitely not going to get 166 yards unless that Buckeye defense just doesn't show up. So, you know, that's something we may not see again for the rest of this season. And I can't wait for that game next week. Even College Game Day, they will definitely be there in Oregon next week. All right, let's move on over to Missouri and Texas A&M. Now, this one was definitely, once again, just chaos. I love the chaos. This one was one of those shockers because Texas A&M came out and just put the works on Missouri. Man, everybody thought Missouri was going to win this game handily. They thought it was going to kind of look like the Notre Dame game for Texas. That was not the case in this game, guys. So more parity, like I said, is definitely showing up. Texas A&M does have a pretty decent team right now. And I think Missouri may have downplayed their competition this week because for sure no one had Texas A&M beating Missouri 41-10. We all know that. We don't have to question that part. But Missouri just didn't show up exactly the way anyone expected. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but they just looked like they weren't in this game at all. For the entire first half. I mean, for me, they didn't look like they were in the game at all the entire game. But Texas A&M, they just bulldozed them from the beginning, just like Georgia got bulldozed by Bama last week. You know, what's crazy about this is Connor Weigman. You know, he threw the ball 22 times, completing 18 passes for 276 yards and never threw a touchdown. So that was very impressive for them to get a win that big. Their running back, on the other hand, is definitely who carried quite a lot because he carried the ball 12 times for 138 yards. He got 3 touchdowns out of it. So Texas A&M was definitely able to put up points on the board, but if you were thinking those were coming from passes from the quarterback, they definitely were not. For Missouri Tigers, look, I'll be honest, I don't know what to say. I think something was in the water this weekend, and a lot of teams just failed where they should not have, and Missouri was just one of the victims. You know, it is what it is. You know, we have a lot of SEC teams in the top 10 with losses now. I'm not sure if Missouri stayed in the top 10. I do have to check that list again. And I'll definitely, that's another video right there that we got to talk about is the rankings and if they even matter at this moment until the official rankings come out, because some of these things don't make sense. Is this just confirming the bias that some of these people have for SEC teams, because so many of these SEC teams are dropping like flies all of a sudden? You know, one thing I will tell you, I'm appreciating the chaos. I'm in love with it right now. All right, so UCLA and Penn State. This game is exactly what everybody thought it was going to be. Penn State once again shows that they can definitely play a complete game, and they can win even if the game is ugly at the beginning. You know, at first the game looked like the two teams were evenly matched, but after the second quarter, that really was not the case anymore. Penn State kind of just ran away with this game. So Penn State, I think their only issue is they have to get over this Ohio State Michigan problem, whereas Penn State is only good enough to really be the third best team in the Big Ten. But now that gets them in a great place to be in the playoffs. You know, because there's many more teams, and Big Ten will definitely get three or more teams in almost every year as long as those teams are in the right place and have the right players to put them in the right place. So Drew Aller actually played pretty well in this game. He completed 17 passes for 237 yards and one touchdown. UCLA actually played pretty decently, man. They have a first-year coach from a football player that played in the NFL. They have a lot of growing to do and a lot of recruiting to do, and I think they'll be perfectly fine. You just got to give them a couple years to get that together, because playing in the Big Ten is no joke. Just ask USC. They just lost to Minnesota. It's really no joke. It's very challenging. Move on over to SMU and Louisville. I think this was another shocker. A lot of people definitely had Louisville winning this game, especially on the betting lines and stuff like that. But this is just another stunner of the weekend, you know, because SMU definitely cleared out the stadium in the fourth quarter. That we can't ignore. Louisville tried to stay in the game the best way that they can, just like when they played Notre Dame. But they definitely came up short in this one, you know. I don't know if they took SMU as seriously as they actually should have. Maybe they thought the starters will give us a problem, but as soon as they tire out, that'll be it for them. But whatever happened in this game, I don't think Louisville actually took SMU 100% serious. But SMU goes into Louisville and gets a 34-27 win. You know, Louisville will definitely bounce out of the top 25 with this loss. I mean, they were already number 22. SMU being 5-1 and unranked, you know, I hope they make the top 25 this week. But you guys have to remember, SMU is in the Big 12, which means if they went out there in that conversation for the Big 12 championship, if they win the Big 12 championship, it's an automatic bid to the playoffs. So it doesn't even actually matter if they're ranked or not. They control their own destiny as long as they do what they have to do to win. You know, Indiana, Northwestern. Now this is one of those games where when you think of Indiana, you think of basketball. No one thinks of Indiana and says, oh yeah, we need to watch Hoosier football. It's just not what they're known for. For the first time in a long time, they are 6-0 in football. That's amazing. You know, well done, Hoosiers. I honestly don't know off the top of my head the last time the Hoosiers were 6-0 in football. But once again, this shows you NIL and college football landscape, the parity is changing. You know, Curtis, the quarterback there, you know, played lights out at Indiana. You know, he went 25 for 33, 380 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he played very well. He didn't make many mistakes, and it actually shows in this game. You know, this guy is playing lights out, making Indiana be 6-0. So will Indiana remain undefeated for the rest of the season? I don't personally think so, because they have a tough road ahead of them. You know, they have to play at Nebraska, and that's not going to be easy. Then they're following by Washington, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, and to finish out the year with the Purdue Spoilermakers. Yeah, we got to call them the Spoilermakers, not even the Boilermakers, because Purdue is well known for ruining Big Ten team seasons, especially late in the year and stuff like that. So, once again, the season is not over for them. They got to keep their heads up high. I can see them definitely having a couple losses in there, but, you know, time will tell. You know, I definitely hope that they have a great season, though. If they can win out and only have one loss to Ohio State or 2 losses to Ohio State and Michigan, which I don't think Michigan's that good right now. So maybe they can beat Michigan and then have 1 loss to Ohio State. I think they deserve to be part of the conversation. Can you really keep them out if they're the 3rd team in the Big Ten or something like that? It'd be kind of tough to agree to that. Now we got to go over to Auburn and Georgia. This game right here was one of those that kind of kept you on your toes for the first quarter or so. But immediately you remember the game that you're watching. You're like, okay, Georgia should definitely be able to run away with this game, right? Well, it was a little bit shocking being 7-3 after the first quarter. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that wasn't, because it almost seems like Bama took something from Georgia after last week, you know. But Georgia, they definitely don't look like themselves. They're not as dominant. They're not calling plays to be ultra aggressive anymore. Maybe something changed. I don't know. But they definitely look like they're playing much more conservative than we have ever seen them over the last 4 or 5 years. Carson Beck played a lot better and cleaned up the mistakes that he did from last week. But of course, that Alabama defense is much better than Auburn. He completed 23 passes for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, he played pretty well. Trevor Etienne, their running back, he played very well as well. 16 carries for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, Georgia eventually ran away with this game. It's not a shocker. The game ended up being 31-13. But to be honest, the game on the field looked a lot closer than the scoreboard actually shows, man. Auburn is turning into one of those scrappy teams, kind of like Kentucky, where they're going to give you some challenge. They almost beat Oklahoma even 2 weeks ago. So teams have to respect Auburn when they get on the field, because although they're not undefeated, they're definitely a good team, and you're going to have to go out there and play. They're not laying down and letting you win just because you're the better team, So good job to them. Good job to the coaches at Auburn. Well done, Georgia, for figuring it out. But that SEC race is wide open. It is not completed yet. So that's something we got to keep an eye on. All right. How about Alabama Vanderbilt? Okay, show of hands. Be honest. And be honest with yourself. Who had Vanderbilt running this game? Because you know what they stated when Vanderbilt won the last game against Alabama, and this was a long time ago. But like I said, there were a lot of games that just kept you on your toes, and this was one of them. Sadly, you had to go to the SEC network to watch this. I bet you CBS or Fox, or in this case ABC, because it's SEC now, bet you they wish they had this game on their network, because this was an insane game. But yeah, nobody's seen this coming. If you bet for Vanderbilt to win this, you're either a parent for Vanderbilt players, or you go to the school, or you have a close tie with something that has to do with the football team, because otherwise nobody was betting for Vanderbilt to win this game. Jalen Milroe, he did not play too bad in this game at all. He definitely made some mistakes, had some of the turnovers that are out of his characteristics, even the fumble. But Vanderbilt through and through is another team that I see in the SEC, kind of like Kentucky, man. They're scrappy. They're willing to play. They believe in the coaching. They believe in their strategy. They believe in everything that they got to do to win. And they're willing to win. They're not afraid to play whomever it is every weekend. Even, once again, they're not undefeated, but they're coming out and just showing they have the will to win. And that's a big deal, man. You can't teach that. You either have it or you don't. And I love that about them. So this is probably the best Vanderbilt team I've ever seen in my personal lifetime. I don't know if I ever remember seeing a Vanderbilt team this good. They stayed in the game. They executed their plays so well, was able to get running plays to work. Diego Pavia, their quarterback, did not even throw an interception in this entire game. He completed 16 for 20 passes at 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. So once again, just well done. Well done. And it's just that everybody thought no matter what happened in this game, Alabama would find a way to come back. We know they can go down the field and score in one play. They have the athletes that can score fast and all that. We know they have all of that. And we know they have the weapons to win this game, and really had no business losing this game. It's just this day, Vanderbilt was just better. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about that. It just is what it is. This game, I think, definitely set the tone for the rest of the weekend, because we have more stunners coming. This was not it. But once again, more chaos. I had Alabama with one loss this season to Tennessee after beating Georgia. But now, with Tennessee losing to Arkansas, there's just more chaos in the SEC. I don't really know how they're going to deal with that. So can Georgia go out to beat Texas so we can just have more chaos in the SEC and see what they will end up deciding who the best one-loss team in the SEC is? But with Tennessee also dropping a game, like I said, we'll have to talk about that more here in just a bit. So the next game we definitely got to talk about is going to be Clemson and Florida State. Florida State is just a bad team this year. There's no other way to put that. I'm not sure if anything else can be said about it. I don't think we want to say anything else about it either. They're bad. They definitely are losing a lot of recruits over and over. Brock Glenn was brought in at quarterback, and that's because DJ Ugalele actually had to undergo surgery after his injury on his hand. So his season is probably definitely over for this one. This might be his last year as a college quarterback. Maybe we won't see him again. I don't know what happened to the collapse of Florida State exactly, but I really hope that they hold on to their coach. I think he's a really good coach. At this point, you're not doing much for the rest of the season. Get those guys on the bench to come out on the field to get some experience and prepare them for next year. The athletic director has to remember that NIL really changed the entirety of college football, and the name of your school is just not enough to carry you anymore. And Clemson is staying on their tear. They look to win the ACC, and at this point, I don't know if Miami can beat them anymore in the ACC championship. I'm really honestly not sure, and I'm really debating about that in my head. At first, I had Miami winning the ACC, but the way that I'm seeing this Clemson team on revenge since they lost to Georgia, it's a different team. It's a different team, so we'll have to find out very soon what Clemson can do. All right, so next up we got Utah and Boise State. So Boise State is just on a tear. There's just, once again, nothing else to say about that. Right now they're not in a Power 4 conference, which means if they're the best team outside of the Power 4, they get an automatic bid for number 12 spot. But Utah State was not really expected to beat Boise State in this game, so I don't really know why anyone is shocked. But Boise State is definitely making a statement in this one, man. 62 points on the scoreboard. Genty is just a beast over there in the running back position, and they're fighting for that number 12 spot, and I think they might be the ones to end up doing it. So as long as they keep winning and they keep looking as good as they do, they might be the number 12 best team. Baylor and Iowa State. Baylor is just one of those. This is one of those games where the scoreboard really didn't tell you what happened, because it wasn't until the third quarter that Iowa State even started to run away with this game. Baylor was in it for the most part, and then in the fourth quarter, Iowa State just closed out the game, and just Baylor simply could not score, could not keep up. But once again, Baylor was in this game until late in the second half, and they just could not finish out. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know if they have a bench that can come in and give those guys a breather. But whatever it is, they have to go back and figure it out. That's whatever it needs to be. Iowa State is still in the hunt for the Big 12, and they are still undefeated, and a lot of people are ignoring that. And there's definitely a big race also going on in the Big 12. This is why I keep saying I'm ignoring a little bit the college football rankings, because in a way they don't make sense to me. Iowa State has to play West Virginia, then they got Central Florida, Texas Tech, Kansas, Cincinnati, and then they go visit Utah before they close out the season with Kansas State. So they definitely got a couple tough games left on that schedule. Now the last 2 weeks are definitely going to be tough, being Kansas State and Utah. That's a tall order. And Utah is also another team that's looking to kind of climb back in the rankings after losing their game to Arizona last week. But Kansas State is also on a tear. Now, after their loss to BYU last week, 38-9, they have a lot of work to do, but they're still in the Big 12 conversation. So, once again, maybe we know even less about these rankings than we actually think. USC and Minnesota. So, USC is still growing out the Big Ten kinks right now. They're still getting their welcome party to the Big Ten. They go into Golden Gopher territory and get beat. That there's no other way to put it. They get shut out not really shut out, but 24-17, where the Gophers had to come back in the fourth quarter to actually win this game. Miller Moss also played very well. He completed 23 passes for 200 yards, 1 touchdown, but he did have 2 interceptions. And that's kind of the story of the game. It just wasn't enough for USC to actually come back and win anything. They were punished with the turnovers and the sloppy play that they had. They did not score in the first or the fourth quarter, so they did not start well. They did not finish well. Minnesota was down 17-10 going into the fourth quarter and actually had to come back and win that game, which was actually very impressive to see. So they put up 14 points to win. Once again, big, USC, welcome to the Big Ten, man. It's just a different kind of league. Next, we got to go to Tennessee and Arkansas. Now, this game was definitely a big shocker for this weekend. Definitely a huge shocker. But Tennessee came out on defense with way too many busted coverages right away in the first drive. Arkansas comes up short and to score a touchdown with the ball thrown away too low. And they had to settle for a field goal. And that kind of, I thought that would set the tone for Tennessee to come out and take care of business, but it wasn't enough. Even at the goal line, Tennessee is still giving up busted coverages where Arkansas was actually at their 1 yard line. The run defense for Tennessee definitely did not show up in this game. Tennessee, in the third quarter, finally comes out with a big run play, and it looks like they're finally getting back into this game. But after that big run play, nothing else lasted long. Tennessee was actually up 14-3 over Arkansas before Arkansas started marching back into this game. All of that happened in the third quarter. It's Arkansas's defense that was not giving anything to Tennessee's offense. And Tennessee's offense was just not being very productive at all. Quarterback was not playing well. That Tennessee defense is definitely what kept them into this game. The momentum went all to Arkansas after they brought the game down 13, after they were down by 1 point when it was 13-14 with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And then Brandon Russell started just cutting through that defense with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game. Tennessee has to overcome a lot of mistakes that this defense and offense were making to win this game. They just never did. Brandon Russell just took over the game for the Razorbacks with 2 minutes left. Malachi Singleton scores a touchdown with around 1 minute left in the fourth quarter. That iced the game. They tried a 2-point conversion. It did not work, so it was still 19-14. But the defense actually gave up a touchdown on purpose to Malachi Singleton. And I think they wanted to just have time so that their offense can come out and actually try to run down the field. Tennessee's number 9 was the one. I'll show the play right here so that you guys see he just literally stepped out of the way on purpose to allow Arkansas to score that last touchdown. 47 ticks left for Tennessee, but the pocket is collapsing and they actually complete a pass at the 25-yard, all the way down to the 25-yard line. They're making a push going forward. 35 seconds left. Third down with 10 seconds left at this point. The ball goes incomplete. Now they're fourth down with 6 seconds left in the game to play. And this is probably the biggest mistake I've ever seen a good quarterback actually make, because the Tennessee quarterback runs out of the pocket. He runs past the line of scrimmage, and then he literally runs out of bounds for the clock to end. I don't know if I've ever seen a mistake that big for a legitimately good starter in college football. That was definitely a first for me. So next we go over to Michigan and Washington. This is one of those games that confirms exactly what I mean by a team is very dangerous after they've had a loss. Washington had nothing to lose in this game. They lost the national championship to Michigan the year prior, or actually in the same year, really. And even though Michigan had a loss to Texas also, Washington simply wanted this game a lot more than Michigan did. And like I said, Washington had that chip on their shoulder. They're like, hey, man, we lost the national championship. We're not coming back out here to lose again. So they came out. They played very well in their own house. Michigan's quarterback got hurt. That's Orgy. He got hurt. Jack Tuttle had to come in, and he played pretty well. It wasn't, too bad. It wasn't too great either. Some of the interceptions that he threw were just too far behind the receiver. And if anybody ever played receiver, when you have to readjust your body to go back like that, where the cornerback is actually just right on your back, it's far too difficult to do something like that, man. It's very difficult to control your body and do that. Some people can do it, but not everyone. Michigan tried to get their running game going, which they did for a good amount of time, but then it started to fail them, and the passing game was just not solid enough, so they started having to run Tuttle to sneak out of the backfield to do anything. So, they are now 4-2, and I think they will definitely drop out of the rankings. They might stay at like number 24 or 25 maybe. But remember, there's still a lot of things that can happen in college football, especially in the Big Ten. The season is definitely not over. I don't know if a 2-loss team is getting into the playoffs or anything, but the season is definitely not over. So Michigan fans, I know you're sitting there and asking for your coach to be fired, but you have to realize your entire team right now is in rebuilding mode. It's not the same team you had for the last 3 years under Harbaugh. So give this guy some time to figure it out and kind of get his feet wet with the team and everything. For Washington, they showed great effort. They played very well in front of their crowd. Their willingness to complete games and actually compete in the Big Ten, which is a very tough matter. Just keep going, recruit the way you have always been, and I think Washington will be a force to deal with in this league. But being 4-2, unranked for Washington, I don't know if this means that the season will be much better because they have a lot of games left, man. They still got to go to Iowa and play. That won't be easy. Then you got to go to Indiana, which is still undefeated. You might lose that game. You still have to play USC, and USC does not want to have a third loss on the season. And then you have to travel to Penn State in November to play in Happy Valley, probably on a night game in a whiteout. And UCLA, I think they can definitely get a win in that game, but then they close out the season with Oregon. That's a tall order, man. That for anybody, that's a tall order. That's very, very tough. Okay. As for Michigan, the road does not get any easier either because they have to play Illinois. Then they got Michigan State, which I think they can win. They get Oregon at home. Then they have to travel to Indiana. They play Northwestern, and of course they close out the season in the game versus the Ohio State University. So they don't have an easy road either, guys. All right, and last but not least, Miami and California. Miami is one of those teams that's starting to scare me a little bit. I'm starting to lose a little faith in Miami. I just don't know if they have what it takes to win the ACC now because of Clemson. They had to come back and score 21 points in the fourth quarter to win this game 39-38 to Cal. Cal is not a bad team, but they're not a great team either. Can you beat Clemson playing like this? 32 seconds in the game that were remaining is when Miami actually finally took the lead 39-38, and Cal came out and threw an interception, and that's really how that comes out. So Miami will definitely stay in the top 10. That's not a problem. If they win the ACC, they get an automatic bid. If they don't, they might get a second spot for the ACC in the playoffs. But we'll have to see how that actually plays out. I'm not exactly sure what will happen, but it'll definitely be fun to find out. I think Clemson might have the edge right now. But let me know what you guys think. We covered your team especially. Let me know in the comments, and we'll definitely have more to come. Thank you for listening, fellas, man. I love you guys. Thank you for subscribing also and liking the videos. Peace out, y'all. Have a good night.